How do you commemorate a big historical event when no one's sure what that event actually was? That's the question they're grappling with right now in the southern Berkshires. Adam Riley has more on a controversial monument in the town of Sheffield.
Some of us have trouble remembering what we were doing a week ago or even last night. But Tom Warner of Great Barrington, Mass. Can say exactly where he was on the evening of September 1st, 1969.
And I was laying right where we're standing right here. And I was laying on the ground like this, and there was a beam on me.
Emanating from an object that resembled nothing he'd ever seen before.
20 feet or more in height, and probably about 30 feet to 40 feet around. And it had, as I'm looking there, I can see it, it had lights. The lights are colors I've never seen in my life.
Hey, what's up, guys? Tyler here with Secureteam. So we have a very interesting and unusual story developing out of Massachusetts, and it all surrounds, as you heard, this UFO monument that commemorates something very strange and that was seen by hundreds of people back in the years surrounding 1969, 1970, and some more unusual events that have happened since then. Now, before we go any further, and I'll play you guys some more of this news report here, if you haven't heard of this incident, it occurred back in Berkshire, Massachusetts in 1969, and it mainly surrounds a man by the name of Thomas Reed, although it involved many others. And why this incident and sighting even made it into the mainstream to begin with, well, that was mainly because usually when you're talking about aliens or UFOs, unlike most, this story boldly went where few of these incidents or tales of these incidents have gone before, and that is into the historical record books, where the Great Barrington Historical Society formally inducted the story back in February of 2015, describing it as, quote, significant and true, after reviewing news coverage, witness statements, and polygraph results. Now, part of this sighting occurred over a bridge in Sheffield, Massachusetts. However, cars are not even allowed to drive over this bridge anymore, and part of the reason, many say, may have to do with what happened there back on September 1st, 1969, when a family in a station wagon met with a UFO. And not only did Mr. Thomas Reed and his family encounter this object that night, but witnesses in 4 surrounding towns reported seeing it. However, those witnesses didn't have as close of an encounter as the Reed's family, and according to Reed, after crossing this bridge, he and his mother, grandmother, and brother saw a bright light rise out of the water of the Housatonic River, where they were then taken mysteriously from their car to what appeared to them as a, quote, airplane hangar, where they said they saw creatures resembling large insects. He was then separated from his mother and grandmother and taken to a strange room, though he could hear them calling for him, and then just as suddenly, they were all back in the car. Between 50 and 100 people reported these strange lights and a massive saucer-like object in the sky to even the local radio station that night. And when Reed took a polygraph test, he was found to be 99.1% truthful. And for this reason, the Great Barrington Historical Society voted 6-3 to recognize the encounter as historically significant and true. And it was the first time that a UFO encounter had had this kind of recognition. And so they placed this 5,000-pound granite monument with a plaque commemorating, quote, our nation's first off-world UFO incident, and it was placed near the covered bridge where the encounter took place. Now, of course, not everyone in the town was thrilled to be known for such a thing, but Mr. Reed and others felt validated that state historians and even the governor officially recognized the encounter as historical, which is something that very few UFO witnesses ever get to feel. However, now, there seems to be some local and state bureaucracy that has thrown the placement and the existence of this memorial into jeopardy, and well, here's some more of that news clip talking about it.
To skeptics, this tale of a close encounter in the Berkshires might sound implausible, but Warner isn't the only one convinced he witnessed something remarkable that night.
Back in 1969, we had listeners call the radio station that evening. And at the time, they didn't know it was a UFO. They just, called the station and said something bizarre is happening.
David Isby is the general manager of WSBS, about 5 miles from Warner's house.
We talked about it on the radio just last week, and one of our listeners, Jane Brown, who's now 84, she called into the radio station, and she told us that she was one of the first people to report it.
These memories are back in the news thanks to this monument in the neighboring town of Sheffield, where a man named Tom Reed says he and his family had their own close encounter that same evening.
This light rose up maybe 2 or 3 stories, and it went actually further away from our vehicle over what's now a large cornfield.
The monument itself didn't arrive until much later, in 2015, after the Great Barrington Historical Society took the unusual step of calling Reed's account historically significant and true. But now its future is in jeopardy. The town of Sheffield says the monument, which was erected by private individuals, might actually be on public property, which could force its removal. The citation from Governor Charlie Baker on the monument's face has lost some luster, too. Recently, a spokesperson told the Boston Globe it was issued in error. And for the record, the Great Barrington Historical Society has some buyer's remorse of its own.
I think the Historical Society regrets that our words or our decision has been taken out of context.
Not that the events of that night weren't significant, Director Robert Kroll adds. But Kroll, who wasn't there when the Historical Society first weighed in, says in retrospect it was a mistake to focus so much attention on one man instead of everyone else who witnessed something inexplicable that night.
The children coming into school and talking about the event, one of them was an old student of mine. One is a local shop owner whose father was the sheriff in town, a police chief in town. So these are reliable people. These aren't people that are self-promoting.
Which sounds like a swipe at Tom Reed, who's detailed his story in multiple media venues and gone further than many of his former neighbors.
An ant with some human features. It had the head that looked like almost like a football.
In comparison, Tom Warner has kept a relatively low profile. Like Reed, though, he's convinced the Sheffield Monument commemorates something momentous, and that forgetting that evening would be a mistake.
When you see something, it's like, I see you. I see that rock. I see that building. I saw that UFO.
Adam Riley Jones, that's like a movie, by the way. That was like a news report. So why did the Great Barrington, I want to get the name right, Historical Society, decide to weigh in on this to begin with?
My sense is that the former executive director there, not Robert Kroll, who we saw in the piece, that she wanted to get edgy and thought this was going to be a way to make history, more contemporary, more relevant, more fun. Now it seems like that they clearly think she went too far. But at the same time, you heard Robert Kroll say that he knows people who he thinks highly of who swear that on that night in 1969 something happened. So they're ambivalent now.
And so, yeah, regardless of whether the memorial stays or not, this sighting, which I've heard of before, I've gotten emails about it, truly seems to be one of the more legit abduction cases. It was seen by many. The main figure who was abducted, well, he doesn't even like to use the term abducted, but visited, taken aboard this massive craft that looked, in their opinion, to be an aircraft hangar. Again, a report of these insect or praying mantis like aliens or beings, which is something that has been echoed by abductees and eyewitnesses for years now. The fact that he passed the polygraph with flying colors, it truly is one to put in the evidence pile, and for whatever reason, they are attempting to get the monument removed. There's several reasons as to why that could be, but we always get this kind of pressure when it comes to UFOs and the validating of UFOs. And so they could be dealing with some outside pressures to take this monument out, but the point remains, which is that the sighting was validated. Hundreds of people witnessed this flying disc. Some of them saw that actually rising up out of the river, which, if you remember, it kind of goes back to our recent video where we were talking about our oceans and how a lot of these objects have been seen rising up out of and going down into. There's something with the water. I think, obviously, it's a perfect place to camouflage something, but the relationship to UFOs and water down here on the planet continues to intrigue me, and I'm definitely looking into more about it. And so if any of you guys have your own tales about these objects or mysterious things happening around water, put it down below or send me an email. So tell me what you guys think about this story. Do you remember this sighting? Were you alive back then? Let us know down below. And in the meantime, be sure to stick around. I've got much more in the works. Thank you all for stopping by today, and I will see you all back in just a bit.